session is about Fulbright, what we call Fulbright Spring Lecture. By the way, the Fulbright Awareness Month is organized by U of International Center. Thank you, Claire. Thank you. Thanks for all the folks who support us in collaboration with U of Fulbright Committee. So I'm part of the Fulbright Committee. My name is Muthuswamy Kumaran. I teach nonprofit management, the Department of Family, Youth, and Community Sciences. I had the wonderful opportunity as a Fulbright scholar in South Korea, 2018-2019, teaching and research appointment. Usually we have the Fulbright lecture, one lecture, but you folks are lucky. We have two lectures today. The title is broadly, hang on one moment, let me get. We titled it as Bridging Borders as Higher Education Staff Insights on Fulbright International Educator Administrators Award by two of UFIC staff who went on the journey. I'm going to quickly introduce them, and then we have about 1 hour. So each presenter will take about 20 minutes. And if you have any questions, comments, please wait until the end. So that will give us about 15, 20 minutes for Q&A. So the first presenter is Nicole Fulls, who's the interim co-director of Study Abroad Services at U of International Center, followed by Dr. Michael Kang, who's the director and assistant scholar, Office for Global Research Engagement. I know Nicole. I worked with her for my study abroad. I know she's very cool and efficient. I have not worked with Dr. Kang, but I'm sure he is cool and efficient as well. Come to think of it, everybody at UOFIC is they are cool and efficient. So with that, Nicole is going to share her experience, followed by Dr. Kang, and then we will have the Q&A towards the end. Nicole.
All right. Thank you, Dr. K. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I'm excited to share a little bit more about the International Educator Award Seminar through the Fulbright program. As you can see here, I did my program in India last year, so I traveled in March of 2024 was for my award. So I'm going to go just a little bit. We're going to start off with a brief introduction of what this program is and then what is part of the application process in case any of you are interested in applying. And then I'll kind of go into sharing a little bit more about what it is that I actually did and learned while on my Fulbright Nehru program. So, what is the IEA Fulbright Seminar? It is the Fulbright International Education Administrators Award, which is a fully funded seminar for U.S. higher education administrators to participate in intensive 2-week seminars abroad to learn about the other countries' higher education systems. That's kind of it in a very broad nutshell, but each award actually has kind of like their own mission of what they're trying to do per seminar, depending on the country that you're going to and just the needs of the host institutions as well. So, by participating in a Fulbright IEA seminar, you can build your institution's capacity for international education, gain a cross-cultural perspective, and open doors to collaboration with colleagues and students throughout the world. And so, this is kind of the main mission of the IEA award through the Fulbright program. So each award is very much designed to meet the needs of whatever the host country is looking for as well. It's very designed to be very mutual in nature. But if you are interested in participating in a program, so you do not have to be a faculty member, you do not have to be a researcher to do this sort of program. This is meant for more administrators that are responsible for some sort of internationalization effort at your home organization. So each award, like I said, will have its own eligibility criteria. So if you are interested in pursuing something like this, I would encourage you to go on the Fulbright website and just kind of see what the eligibility requirements are. Some of them will say we want higher SIOs or senior international officers specifically. Some of them will say we're open to SIOs, to faculty, and whoever else has interest in internationalization. So they're all a little bit different, but there will probably be something that you are eligible for. So I would go ahead and take a look. But yeah, as long as you have some role of internationalization effort, and then usually there is a minimum of at least 5 years of experience in working within internationalization efforts at your home organization. So the application process includes having to submit your CV or your resume. You do a professional biography. You also then have to write several essays, right? It's very similar to other grants and proposals and things that you would be writing. But basically, I had to explain why was I choosing to submit an application for the Fulbright Nehru program in India specifically, and how does it relate to my profession and my work back on campus. So, for those of you that don't know, I work as the co-interim director of study abroad, and I primarily have been working on program development in Latin America and Asia. And so this fit perfectly with my expertise and what I do on a daily basis. And one of my reasons for choosing the India program was because we currently do not send a single student out to India from UF, but we receive a lot of Indian international students. And so that dichotomy is something that I kind of wanted to explore and see if there are ways in which we can increase outbound mobility to India. So I had to kind of write all of that in my country selection and professional relevance essay. And that also filters into the next essay about outcomes and impact of the participation. So my goal was to go understand a little bit more about the higher education system, how it works, how the calendars are, if there are any programs that are already being offered that maybe UF can tap into or partner on. So just try to find a better strategic collaboration that would allow me to send students outbound to India. They also ask you, how are you personally going to prepare for this experience as well? So there is a statement on how are you going to culturally prepare? What kind of work have you done to make sure that you are interculturally competent, that would allow you to interact, in an appropriate manner with our hosts in country. And then separately as well, they also want you to write a pretty thorough institutional statement that talks a little bit about UF as a whole. So I ended up learning a lot about UF through my own research while putting together this application. And it kind of is a way that so what they do is that they essentially send that institutional statement out to the partners once they kind of know who the cohort is. And it's kind of like they try to match make a little bit where they sent over our like resumes and our purpose statements and the institutional statement out to the hosts, to the potential hosts that we would go and visit, and they would say, "Yeah, we're interested in working with these schools, these providers. Let's go ahead and host them." So it's my understanding on the back end how our Indian colleagues arranged all the logistics was actually based off of what they read and what they liked in the institutional statement as well, because obviously the end result is that we are all able to create partnerships that are going to be meaningful and hopefully sustainable. And then lastly, you do have to submit some letters of recommendation as well. But one thing I would suggest is that if you need data, you don't need to have access to like our internal systems necessarily to get the data that you need in order to support your rationale of why this particular program or why this particular seminar. We have a whole data website on the UFIC international site, so I have the QR code here to that. But that is pretty much what I also used as well. I used Open Doors reports, I used our global engagement report. I looked at kind of more UF data as well, looked through all of the resources that are on the International Center site, and that's what I used to help write my essays and things like that. So, the more poignant you can be about why this program is important to you and the internationalization efforts of UF, I think the better your application is going to be. But moving on, I'm going to go ahead and kind of talk a little bit more about my actual experience. So, like I said, I went in 2024 on my program. We visited 12 different universities. We were actually scheduled for one more, but one got canceled due to political reasons, actually, and safety concerns. But then we also had three panels and lectures from different organizations, from Education USA, from other researchers that are working at like kind of like satellite research centers from the University of Chicago, from Harvard University, things like that. On the weekends, since we don't have business meetings on the weekends, we did do some cultural visits. And so, of course, you can't go to India, right, without seeing the Taj Mahal. So we did go and do that as well for one of our weekend visits. And then we also had two consulate receptions kind of to frame the beginning and the end of the experience. So we started in Delhi. We took a side trip to Agra for the cultural excursion. Then we flew to Ahmedabad, and then we ended in Hyderabad. So it was a intense 2 weeks, but it was absolutely amazing. I loved every minute of it. I've learned so much about the Indian higher education system, but there's also still so much that I don't know. And I constantly have to go back to my notes to try to remember all of the different terms and colleges versus universities versus the deemed universities and things like that. So I've learned a whole new set of jargon, but it is still very confusing to me. But at least now I'm familiar with the terms and I know where I can go when I looking at different universities and partnerships to make sure that they would be helpful for both of us. So the major themes that we talked about over the course of the seminar, the big thing was the National Education Policy, or the NEP. So we talked about that extensively throughout the 2 weeks, and really the kind of one of the major themes ended up being how did the NEP that was established in 2020, how is it making its way through the higher education system still today, like 4 years later at the time, and what it really has done to change the framework for higher education in India. So, the national education policy envisions an education system rooted in Indian ethos that contributes directly to transforming India sustainably into an equitable and vibrant knowledge city by providing high quality education and making India a global knowledge superpower. So, we talked a lot about this policy and how it's been changing the system, and I'll get a little bit further into that throughout this presentation. We also talked about the current and future realities of higher education within India. There are way too many college-age students and not enough institutions. And so you'll see a lot of new universities, schools, and colleges are popping up all throughout India to help address that gap. But that also explains why there are a lot of Indian students coming to the United States and Australia and Canada, for example, for higher education opportunities. Um, we also saw that a lot of Indian higher education institutions are moving towards privatization because it allows more curricular flexibility, and they are really trying to move towards modeling their systems from the US kind of structure. So that again, since they know a lot of their graduate students will come and do graduate work in the US, trying to make sure that their undergraduate system mirrors a little bit better the US system so that their students are able to go abroad and get a US degree, for example. Um, and I feel like we are kind of competing, right, between higher education systems with India and the US. And so they're trying to make things a little bit more flexible for students as well. If the private schools you'll see will have the general education opportunities, whereas a lot of the more public schools, they still go straight into their degree requirements right from the get-go. We also talked a lot about innovation and entrepreneurship, the education to industry timeline. We went and visited a fintech city as well, which was very interesting. They're kind of creating their own little ecosystem, their own little city within India and trying to create educational opportunities where they will study and then just right down the road they have their internships and then they will get hired by those companies afterwards. So it's like creating their own revolving door and ecosystem of student to work pipeline. And then, of course, you can't go without talking about internationalization and mobility. So, in the past, nearly 25% of all international students in the entire United States are from India. But it's actually the second highest population of international students that we have here at UF. I think they might have actually surpassed our Chinese students last year, I believe. So we see that this is an increasing incoming population. As far as study abroad, COVID kind of killed a lot of outbound study abroad activity to India on a national level. They used to get about 3,000 students per year coming to India on study abroad programs, but now, or at least last year, there was only about 400. So even post-COVID, for some reason, mobility to India has not increased. So again, some kind of like general trends and observations and things that I've learned. I was actually quite surprised to see that most of the universities, at least that we visited, had very similar structures and support systems as we would see on our campuses, maybe just on a slightly smaller scale when compared to UF. But having these huge gyms and pickleball courts and ping pong and multiple libraries around campus, the dormitories. I guess I'm so used to many other areas of the world not having those support systems on a campus that it was a little bit surprising for me to see, but it's also very motivating because our students have, everybody has hesitations with change sometimes. And when you compound that with the cultural differences, it can be very daunting for some students. But to know that they still have a clinic on campus, that they have the gyms, they have the support systems, they have counselors available for students, and that they really do pair their students and their faculty together for a sort of like mentoring while they are abroad. Like that was all very encouraging to see coming from like a more study abroad perspective. Um, like I said, they are trying to mirror more of US and Australian institutions and are promoting more cross-curricular activities than they had previously, and specifically for like these more privatized institutions. They are also trying to focus more on involving research and students in their research within the university, when previously their research was kind of separate from the students. It was even housed like in a separate research center. And so now they're trying to reintegrate everything to allow students to have more of those experiential learning opportunities and to connect faculty research with students wanting to engage in research as well. One interesting thing was that a lot of the institutions, at least that we visited, are striving to become kind of Ivy Leaguers. And as such, a lot of them are even very picky about which institutions in the United States, for example, that they would like to partner with. And I was told on multiple occasions from a few universities that they will only partner with institutions that are listed in the QS Top 500 World University Rankings, which was very interesting because the cohort of people that I went with, there's about 10 to 12 people on these seminars, and we were the only ones within the top 500. So it was very interesting to be there and to hear my colleagues say, well, that's disappointing that they don't even want to work with the University of Missouri or the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, because they weren't listed in the top 500. For those of you that don't know, UF is in like about 200 slot. I think 204 last time I checked. Um, the other thing to note is that the universities and the top schools in India are actually very young. They were established within the last like 15 years for the most part. And the reason, well, maybe not the only reason, but one of the reasons why they are listed as a top institution is because they've adopted kind of this US model, this US structure of incorporating experiential learning, of allowing students to kind of take courses from different disciplines before choosing their major or their degree rather than just going straight into something. It allows the students a little bit more flexibility and they're encouraging more interdisciplinary work than the traditional universities in the areas. Um, and this is also why, after the NEP was established in 2020, the NEP has also kind of mandated that they start doing more cross-cultural, or sorry, cross-collaborative work between disciplines and that they allow the students to kind of take courses outside of their major. And so because these private institutions have kind of been doing that all along, they are now currently ranked higher because they're following what the new NEP kind of stated, whereas the public and the state schools are really struggling to make that shift required by the NEP. Because as I'm sure you can imagine, the government just said, here's what you need to do, but gave them no resources or no kind of, steps of how to make that happen. And so the public and the state schools are working towards that, but it's not nearly at the pace at what some of those private institutions are doing. The other thing to kind of note is that the concept really of like professional staff and administrators, at least for internationalization efforts, kind of really doesn't exist. It's always a faculty that has like an add-on of being the international representative, and or like a committee of faculty that are also doing international work. So when when I had to introduce myself, the first thing they asked me, well, what's your research in? And I was like, well, I'm not a researcher. I'm not a faculty member. I'm professional staff. This is what I dedicate my entire career to. And to them, that was very shocking, I think, because they couldn't understand, like, how are you not a professor? And so that was very interesting, very humbling. But yeah, they really don't have like an international center necessarily, but they have a cohort of faculty that are also just passionate about international work. So the support is a little bit different between the two. So yeah, after going and looking at all of these universities and talking with folks, I kind of came back with some general ideas. I still have not been able to get anything off the ground at the moment, but what I saw and no noticed was that there are three potential universities that I think our students might enjoy and might want to do an exchange program with. So the first one is the University Ahmedabad, which I thought might be good for our liberal arts and science students or our business students. And then there's Jindal Global University, which really has a bunch of everything. But what I thought was very unique was that they also have these law classes, which we are lacking currently pre-law programs for study abroad. So that might be a way to tap into a new college that really isn't involved with study abroad as much as some of our others. But they also would be an excellent choice for any class or HHP or business programs as well. And then IIIT Hyderabad. There's a lot of IITs and IIITs, but they are very good at engineering, STEM, computer science. And one of the big areas that we want to grow is our computer science programs as well, because we are seeing that major increase on campus, and yet the amount of study abroad opportunities for computer science students are very limited. So being able to expand that would be great. We also visited other institutions like Ashoka University, which they have a visiting student program that our students could actually direct enroll now for summer, semester, or academic year opportunities. So that was nice to kind of learn that there are other programs that already exist. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can send students immediately if we wanted to Ashoka, whereas with creating an exchange program would take a little bit more time. So I've also, since again, my expertise is usually in program development, I'm always thinking about new faculty-led ideas or perhaps even COIL ideas that we could incorporate within the International Center. So one of the schools that we visited was called the Miranda House. It's an all-women's institution, and they focus a lot on STEM. And so I would love to perhaps find a way that we can do a Women in STEM program, partnering with the Miranda House specifically and talking about what does that look like in India? How does the gender disparities differ between the US and India? And then how are they also using their knowledge and expertise in STEM to promote sustainability practices on their campus? Because they actually recycle a bunch of their papers at the end of the year, and then they were selling notebooks and things of all the recycled paper. They have a whole station where you can go and learn how to sew, to mend your clothing, to promote that sustainability. So it was a very cool campus, and I think a program like that would be great for our students. And then another surprising one was the National Institute of Design. I walked out of there with so many ideas, and I was so excited to learn a little bit more about them upon my return. But they have so many programs that are, yes, more like art and media focused, but I think would be very easy to tie in to do an interdisciplinary program. So, for example, they have an entire major curriculum on toy design. And I was like, what if we partnered with our education students that are trying to build lessons, right? Interactive lessons or interactive toys that will teach something, partner them with the toy design folks in India and have them collaborate on a project where maybe they come out with a new tool or game that you can use in your classrooms to teach something. Or they have an engineering or they have a design for disability program, and we can combine that with our engineering students as well, of designing for disability and making sure that people have access to things. And then journalism, of course, goes very easy with media design. And so there's a lot of opportunities for our students to work, again, kind of interdisciplinary with these students at these other institutions or at the National Institute of Design. So while I am focused mostly on study abroad, and that is where I kind of live in the realm of the International Center, but going as part of the Fulbright, I wanted to make sure that I was working on behalf of the entire International Center and going in with a lens that would help multiple units and not just my own. So, before I left, I went and I talked to our Director of International Student Services and asked them if there was anything that they wanted me to kind of ask and gather information about to bring back home to help them better serve our international students on campus as well. And luckily enough, in the itinerary, we did go and meet with Education USA representatives. We kind of learned about what supports they already offer. Um, and then I also kind of learned about what is making the Indian students come to the United States in particular, and what are their kind of like past, present, and future challenges. Um, Most students, as I mentioned before, still come at the graduate level. And now there are not as many admissions issues since these top schools are mirroring the US system, whereas before, undergraduate degrees were typically only 3 years long. And so getting that degree kind of evaluation was a big barrier for our Indian students to come here. But it's nice to know that that is no longer becoming as big of a barrier as before. Their parents are willing to pay for a better education even if that opportunity is abroad. They are very concerned, or what I was told is that they are very concerned about the status of the school that the students are going to, and that they surround themselves with the types of peers that are going to challenge them as well. However, of course, the drawback is that they are a little bit terrified to send their students here to the United States for security reasons. We talked a lot about guns and gun safety and things like that. And so that is a real thing that people are concerned about, and why maybe some are choosing to go to Australia or Canada rather than coming to the United States. Um, but looking forward, we do predict that India will surpass China in the number one like exporter of students, and that we will see more undergraduate level students coming abroad as well. So I won't kind of go into all of this, but I did ask the International Student Services Office, what questions do you have that I can go and ask while I'm there? And these were some of the questions that they come up with some of my answers. So, one of the main reasons, or one of the main questions that they had was, what's the main factor for Indian students to decide to come to US versus anywhere else in the world? And like I said, it's a lot about status and considering their peer groups when they choose a university, but also the hopefully current and will be current OPT package is pretty unrivaled compared to other countries. And so that's why they will come here. They come here for the long haul. They're here for a 4-year degree, and then they also want to be able to use that degree usually within the United States. Um, US also offers research opportunities that are typically not available in India. Like I said, they're moving towards incorporating research back into the universities themselves, but until recently, they tended to be separate centers, separate entities, and it really wasn't student accessible. But now that is kind of changing. However, we still have more opportunities than them when it comes to that. Um, Yeah, so I'm gonna cut it off there because we have a whole other speaker with Michael. But I absolutely loved my experience in India. I still think about it all the time, and I am trying to, when I can finally have a minute, I would love to figure out more ways of how we can get our students to go to India. I know Dr. K, you used to run a very successful program, and so I would love to try to start something of my own, or make sure that we can collaborate maybe with different colleges that we haven't really worked with before and getting them to consider building a program in India. But yeah, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Nicole, for the excellent presentation that covered your application process and then your experience in India and then outcomes and opportunities. I mean, obviously, you It was a very fulfilling trip and the program for you, and I'm sure you will take it to the next level. Next up, Michael Khan. Dr. Khan, take it away.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. K. And thank you, Nicole, for doing a great introduction to Fulbright. So I'm going to primarily cover just an intro to Fulbright and then the Fulbright IEA Nicole covered, so we can probably skip that. I'll then talk about my Fulbright Taiwan experience and then finally the impact that the program had on me. So I'll go over this very quickly, but if you aren't familiar, the Fulbright itself is a very prestigious federal cultural exchange program, and it was established in 1946 and it has led many of the faculty or the actually participants in the Fulbright program. They go on within the government, so you can see heads of states, MacArthur Foundation Fellows, Pulitzer Prize, Nobel laureates, and so on and so forth. The IEA is just part of the Fulbright itself. So it's one of multiple different types of programs. So if you want to take a look, you'll see just a wide range of the types of Fulbrights. So typically when you hear Fulbright, you'll think of the Fulbright Scholar Program, but then there are very specialized ones. So for instance, again, our IEA, but they have one just for Amazonia, for the Arctic initiatives. They have Fulbrights, even though they're primarily for US citizens, they are also available for non-US citizens as well. And then they have Fulbrights are designed a bit more for an institution overall. And then, so in addition to these, we also have Fulbright specialist programs, as well as the Fulbright teacher exchanges and Fulbright Hayes program. So chances are, if you are interested in applying for a Fulbright, there is something that may be of interest to you. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or to Claire. So at UF, the International Center, we handle the Fulbrights. So again, we are always happy to help however we can. And then the IEA, yes, the primary purpose, Nicole covered all this. Let's see if there's anything interesting. Yes. So what I did is I covered the offerings that are available right now. So you can get a sense of what's being offered and what each IA is looking for. So you may have noticed that India is absent. So if you want to go to India, which I do, we are hoping that it will come back soon. But you will see that they have a new France in Senegal, although it's primarily designed for HBCUs. And then if you take a look at the description, it tells you what type of administrator they're looking for. Some of them, for instance, Korea, they want more of the administrators who deal with students on a day-to-day. And then, for instance, in France, they only want the provosts, the deans, the directors. That's who their target audience is. And then you'll see the deadline is pretty far in advance. So if you want to go for this year, there's still plenty of time. Applications are open, and this would be for next year. And then, as a note, the Fulbright, despite everything happening at Becca, the IEAs, from as much as we've heard, they are still going on and they're still proceeding. So what we're doing is just going forward as normal until we hear otherwise. And then the types of activities that are included on the IEA. So this includes site visits at the universities as well as government agencies, a lot of local universities, local institutions. You get to meet with a lot of the officials as well. So maybe local community leaders as well as national leaders. In Taiwan, since it's such a small country, it's a bit easier to kind of meet with all the different leaders and to get around. There are also a lot of networking events that help with, and also they provide historical and cultural tours. And so why would you want to consider an IEA? So first of all, it is fully funded. So funding is always important, and they cover pretty much everything. Even for us, they provided a stipend for us. So in theory, we didn't have to pay for anything. If you wanted to do extra stuff, extra meals, things like that, that's on your own. Souvenirs are on your own. But the flight, the amenities, the hotels, travel, local transportation, everything is all organized for you. We actually joke very often within our group that it was fantastic. At first, it was weird because everything was scheduled for you, but after a couple of days, we were very relaxed. We're like, oh, what are we going to do today? Itineraries all set out. We get more wake up messages and we're told who we're going to visit, who's going to be talking, who's going to be preparing, and the exact time schedule up to within 5 minutes. And we knew exactly what we're eating as well. So it was an interesting experience. The IA, it also allows you to globalize your campus. So again, at UF, we do what we can to globalize. I'm sure if you are from a specific unit, you will have your initiatives as well. And like I mentioned earlier, feel free to reach out to the UFIC at any point, and we can help brainstorm ideas or give you suggestions and even share our contacts that we have. So similarly, you also get to develop and explore key partnerships. So it can be within your own field, or if you want to do from a broader range, that's perfectly acceptable as well. We get to understand the higher education systems abroad. So this is something that is also very valuable because we work with international students all the time. We do research all the time. So understanding how the higher education system works in other countries provides you with a lot of benefits because you will understand what works for them, why it works, why certain things function the way they do, and it makes things much easier in the long run. You also get to share best practices. So you meet a lot of your counterparts, and you also get to meet counterparts within the US. So even though the IEA itself, it is in another country, we got together, we created a cohort, and you basically are with your cohort 24/7 for 2 weeks. You become very good friends with them. You know you know all their habits, you learn what they are like, you learn their histories very quickly, and then you're able to help each other out. So we still have a WhatsApp group and we send messages back and forth. I'm pretty good friends with the even smaller group, and we just send messages maybe weekly. So we discuss current events that are happening or share things that are going on in Taiwan. So it's a very good cohort structure that they have in place. So even though the program itself was only 2 weeks, it has built long-lasting relationships. And then finally, participating in IEA will help enhance the visibility of UF in the US and abroad. So we are been relatively fortunate. Nicole touched upon this, that we are relatively high ranked and well known. So many institutions will have heard of us. But when I'd say within our cohort, when they do the choosing, they do a lot of matchmaking. And then the way it works is Fulbright, at least for the Taiwan Fulbright, the initial screening is done by Fulbright within the US, but then all of our applications are sent to the participating universities, and then they do their own evaluation as well. And then that's why every year is going to be different. So what was happening, what were looking for when we went, is might be very different next year. It could depend a lot on the world politics or what's happening within the country, different priorities that come up, things like that. So even though we do our best to help advise other potential applicants, it may change. But when we talk about I do have a slide on tips. I'll cover that a bit more in a little bit. The eligibility for the IEAs does require you to have a US citizenship, and then you need to be affiliated with a university, college, or a nonprofit. So the Fulbrights themselves, they are open to basically anyone. So a lot of times they look for professionals, they look for artists, musicians, not just faculty and not just staff. So it's open to everyone. And like I said, there's Fulbrights for all different types of people. So as long as you're interested, you should be able to find something that is applicable to you. And let's see, Fulbrights themselves, sometimes, many times I'd say, they provide you with financial support because you're moving. The traditional Fulbright Scholar programs are typically about 1 year. There's some that are a bit longer, some that are split up, some that are multiple countries. But it's a big investment on your part because it's going to be a lot of time and some monetary. Many times the faculty will choose to bring their families with them. If they have kids, they might even bring their kids, and the students, and then their kids become students in a different country for a year, which is a very interesting experience for them. And then one important thing to note is the IEA awards, they are not designed for research and teaching. So even I'd say the IEAs primarily they're administrators. There were a couple faculty, I think there were two other faculty in my cohort. And but the main thing is they emphasize no research, no teaching. In your free time, you're free to talk about research and teaching, but that wasn't the priority. So again, our priority is making new connections and sharing information. So the application requirements were covered. So the tips, Nicole touched upon this as well, but every award is going to be very different. So depending on which country you're reading, make sure you read the description very carefully. And then you also want to take advantage of the IIE resources. So the website, they will have basically info sessions, and those info sessions are very valuable. So I recommend that if you are really interested, go attend a live session or watch one of the pre-recorded sessions because they provide you a lot of information. They answer a lot of the basic questions that you might come across, and it's very helpful information. It tells you what you should include in your application. So specifically, one something that I found very helpful was you need to really demonstrate how your participation is going to directly contribute to your institution, as well as your own professional development. So they want to make sure that the Fulbright helps yourself, but also what it means for UF or your institution as well as US. Because when we go abroad, we are tasked with being cultural ambassadors. So they want to make sure that you know what you're doing and that you will leave a good impression once you do leave. So now I have a quick video that summarizes the IEA in Taiwan.
I can't hear the sound.
Can't hear a sound. Okay, so let me see if I can share this. I'm going to share just the video as a. Okay. How's this? Okay.
My name is Randall Meadow. I'm the Executive Director of the Foundation for Scholarly Exchange, Fulbright, Taiwan. It's my pleasure and honor to welcome you to Taiwan for the International Education Administrators Workshop and Seminar. We have been in Taiwan for 67 years, and we believe that Taiwan is the premier destination for your study abroad students and for international exchange. We know that in these 2 weeks in Taiwan, you will experience warm hospitality, beautiful nature, and invigorating relationships and conversations with our university partners. We are excited that you're here. You represent many kinds of universities and colleges in the United States. We know that you'll find this experience to be enriching and exciting. The ultimate goal is for you to send your students here, for you to come back to Taiwan again, and for you to enjoy yourselves in Taiwan. Welcome.
Fulbright Taiwan!
All right. Okay, so back to our presentation. Okay, let's stop out of this. There we go. So now back to the my own experience within Taiwan. So within pre-departure, they put you through a lot of there's a lot of stuff that gets done and that's needed and it's done very quickly. So when you apply, they give you deadlines. They say you're supposed to know like several months in advance who's going to get selected. Unfortunately, that was not my experience. And then talking with a lot of my colleagues, it's not the experience. I'm sure Nicole might have had something similar as well. But they do their best, and then there is always a lot of things that pop up last minute. So be prepared that if you are applying for this, you might be delayed. So what happened for me especially was I had to hold off basically a month, and I didn't know I selected until basically the end of January, and then we are leaving in March. So it's very quick, a very quick turnaround. They expect you to get a lot done. So there is some paperwork that's necessary. You need to work with travel. They help you with the travel, which is very helpful. So they have travel agencies that will book your flights, things like that. You'll need to create a personal profile. We had some cultural language prep readings to do, and then we also started networking with all of our cohort even before we left. And then there is also the setting of personal and professional goals. So they ask you to fill that out and then think about that throughout your entire process. There are a couple surveys that they ask you to complete throughout the program. So these are just some of the requirements that the IEA itself will ask you to complete. So some of the specific expectations for our program, we were told that every one of us would need to provide a 3 to 5 minute interview. So basically what happened was every university we visited, one of us from our cohort would be the main, I guess, representative for all of our cohort. And then at that point, that person would give gifts that were provided by their own university, and then once the meeting was done, they would give a 3 to 5 minute interview. There were also separate requests for interviews by other universities. So I got a few requests, a couple of my colleagues got a few requests. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to give the interviews just because of our policy. And then same thing, some of our other colleagues, they had to decline them. But it could be a good opportunity to really share what's going on at your university or within your department if you're able to do that. And then, like I mentioned before, part of our role is to serve as cultural ambassadors. So you need to know what you're doing and behave. So we've have heard some horror stories from the other guides, but for the most part, our cohort behaved very well, and then we left a very good impression from what I heard. So this was our cohort. There were 14 of us, and we are scattered from all around the US. You can take a look at this map. And then I also included what type of university it was. And you'll see it was a wide range. So we had public universities, private universities, we had colleges, the Miami-Dade College, and then we had universities that were maybe about 3,000 students versus universities that were over 100,000 students. And then, like I said, the committees, they do a good job really kind of finding and matchmaking. So you see it's a good representation all across the US as well as different types of institution. And then one thing to note is Fulbright itself, it sort of prides itself in that your university rank doesn't matter as much. So you'll see there are a lot of small universities that most people may not have heard of, and then you have some bigger universities as well. So of course, for me, we have UF, and then our closest peers would be Penn and Harvard. So the three of us, we kind of stuck together a lot, and then some of the other smaller colleges, they stuck together. So we had our own cohorts form, but we were still able to get together and learn about each other. So now I'm just going to take some time to give you a quick overview of what my Fulbright was like. And every year, the program may change depending on who is going to be participating. So they do have lists. They do listen to the feedback. Towards the end, they let us know we had a very poor experience at one university and they've been blacklisted, so they won't be working with Fulbright anymore. But they have found new universities. Some universities have been there for a long time. Some of them are very old. When you go visit, they will also warn you that you'll be meeting a lot of people. So in my case, we had to bring business cards. We're here. You can actually see this is my stack the new contacts I made. So whenever I need to find someone from within Taiwan, a university, I'm able to easily find that. We have contacts now from all across Taiwan. But so starting off, arrived in Taiwan, and then we started off with some meeting the Foundation for Scholarly Exchange, which kind of organizes Fulbright within Taiwan. And then we visited the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and then we got a bit of the walking tour. So if you look towards the upper left as well, you'll see the map of Taiwan and where we were traveling. So you'll get to see us travel around. Second day, we visited the American Institute in Taiwan, which is basically the consulate. So Taiwan itself isn't technically recognized as a country, so we have the American Institute in Taiwan that handles a lot of visa issues. And then we had a lot of cultural immersion programs as well. So primarily the weekends, I'd say, are deal with kind of getting yourself and understanding what it's like to experience Taiwan. So we did all our business work in the morning and the afternoon, and then sometimes on the weekends we had a lot of free time. So we got to go tea picking and had tea ceremonies. We got to explore a lot of food in the night markets, things such as that. So the next day we visited three universities. So National Taiwan University, which is top ranked university in Taiwan. We also had the Taipei or National Taiwan University Science and Technology, which I previously had a MOU agreement with when I worked at DCP, and then also the Taipei Medical University. So at each of these institutions, we were able to do introductions. We got to learn about their university and learn a bit more about what their priorities were and what they were interested in. So following day, we had more universities. You see that we started to move across the island, so more kind of slowly making our way down. So we also have some existing partnerships, for instance, with the National Tenshu University, an exchange program with them. And then we have been in talks with the National Yangming Chiaotong University. Then going further down, you'll see that we had the Dongkai University, National Chinan University. So of course, food in Taiwan, you'll notice I included a lot of that. It's a small island, but there's lots of different types of food. And one of the benefits is that it's also very inexpensive. So compared to the US, especially Gainesville, just the price, what you could get for just a few dollars was amazing. And then just talking to our colleagues, the food was one of the really nicer parts about visiting. So then further down, it was another weekend. So we got to go visit more towards the middle of Taiwan. So we had more food. We got more cultural immersion activities. So we got to go within the mountains. The nice thing about Taiwan is there are a lot of urban cities, but there's also a lot of nature involved too. So a lot of mountains and lakes, and then rivers, forests, things like that. So whatever you're interested in, we were able to get a wide range to really see what the country is like. And then you'll see we went down again, more towards the southwest now. And then we had another cultural immersion day. So more food, of course, exploring a lot of the temples, and then visiting the night markets, going on some of the tours on the rivers and canals, things such as that. And then back towards more of the university visits. So you'll see we got part of these were kind of mixed. So half of the day would be university visits and half of them would be cultural excursions. And then so we went to this National Sanya University. Nice thing about them, they have their own private beach, which is pretty neat. But their faculty, a lot of their researchers, they do work on the ocean. So I was able to get their contacts, and we have a lot of work as well. So I'm putting our engineering faculty in touch with each other. And then now we headed more towards the east, and then some more cultural immersion programs. And then this is more of a wrap up. So I was able to meet with some of our alumni as well. So we have the Gator Nations everywhere. So that certainly stands true. And then we were able to meet a lot of some of the faculty I met with. They said they were from UF or they graduated. And some of them I knew from 10, 15 years ago. So it's always nice to catch up with them as well. So what did this mean personally? The impact I'd say is I was able to take a lot of what I learned from the seminar and really implement it back here at UF. So we were able to maintain and leverage new professional connections and then opportunities for continued engagement with Fulbright in Taiwan. We actually went back to Taiwan in December to continue a lot of the connections that I had started back during this trip. And then I talked about this a little bit as well, but there is definitely long-term personal and professional benefits from the IE experience. So we have our friends, we have our connections, we have our cohort, and we have our international connection and friends. So from an institutional perspective, we were able to discuss a lot such as study abroad, the joint degree programs, the COIL and virtual exchange, as well as student exchange agreements, language programs, visiting scholars, internships. The sister cities was brought up. I brought that up a couple of times, and then also the TechRo connection. So that's basically the Taiwan exchange for culture, I believe. So basically, it is the consulate within the US. And so, like I said, we went back in December. I brought some of our administrators there and some of our specific faculty. We primarily focused on engineering and also on, I'd say, more on AI and semiconductors, but we did do some work with biology as well. So the TSMC, of course, we went there, the headquarters, and we were able to meet with some of our previous contacts, and they put us in touch with their new other faculty as well. So I wanted to give you a quick snapshot of what Taiwan was like 2023 to 24. So we had 81 international Taiwanese students, one active student exchange, one MOU, and then one study abroad program. But then after by after my visit and things that we've been working on, we have two active student exchange agreements, and then we have another one in the works. We also have two MOUs now and another MOU in the works. And then also we have one study abroad program, another study abroad program, which has been put into development. So I wanted to leave a couple minutes for questions now. So I know I rushed through, but if you have any questions about any part of my trip or any part of our trip, we'd be happy to answer.
Right. Thank you, Michael, for sharing your Fulbright experience in Taiwan and also for giving some tips and a pep talk to your colleagues who may be interested